Hi, Counselor Flynn.
Hi, Christine. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Hi, Fernando. Counselor Edwards is just running about 5 to 10 minutes behind, but she should be on shortly, okay?
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Christine.
You're welcome.
Hi, everyone. I know there's a lot of folks here. I think we're just waiting for Counselor Edwards, if I'm not mistaken. But thank you to everyone else who's here.
Hi, Counselor Wu. Counselor Edwards is just running about 5 to 10 minutes late. So she should be here shortly, okay?
Thank you, Christine.
You're welcome.
Hey everyone, just getting the notes up and then we'll get started shortly. All right, we're gonna get started and I will hopefully see myself soon. There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Lydia Edwards. I'm chair of the Government Ops Committee here at Boston City Council. It's Thursday, December 10th, 2020, and we're here for a virtual hearing on Docket 1100, an ordinance to ensure gender inclusivity on city form. Councilors Michelle Wu and Liz Braden are the lead sponsors, co-sponsors of this proposal, and it was referred to this committee on November 18th, 2020. In accordance with Governor Baker's executive order, we are hosting this hearing on Zoom. This allows us to do our jobs, but at the same time balance the public safety needs and concerns of the moment. The public may watch this meeting via live stream at www.boston.gov/city-council-tv. It will be also rebroadcasted at a later date on Xfinity 8/RCN82/Verizon 1964. For public testimony, written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.go@boston.gov and will be made part of the record and available to all councilors. In short, this proposal will require all city forms, documents, and certificates to have a gender or sex designation to include a non-binary gender identification option to be marked as X. The proposal includes a provision requiring that forms reflect gender inclusion and inclusion of all family structures. The proposal also requires the Office of Intergovernmental Relations to prepare a report for the City Council within 60 days of passage of this proposal that lists all city forms and documents that require a gender or sex designation, whether the form has a gender neutral designation option, and if applicable, whether binary gender designation is required by city, state, or federal law. Participating today on behalf of the administration is Patrick Vandell, the mayor's LGBTQ liaison. And I'm going to get a list of other participants, but before I have them announce who's here, I wanted to go ahead and announce in order of arrival my colleagues who have joined us today. Along with the lead sponsors, Councillor Wu and Councillor Braden, we also have Councillor Flynn, and Councillor Janey and Councillor Mejia. Did I miss anybody? Oh, Councillor Royo also is available as well. Did I miss anybody? Hopefully not. So with that, I wanted to make sure that I allowed my colleagues to have some brief opening remarks. I do, and after your remarks, I'll read a letter into the record from Councillor Campbell, and then announce who's here also to speak in today's hearing. So I'll let the lead sponsors lead, Councillor Wu, then Councillor Braden.
Thank you to everyone for joining us. Thank you to Madam Chair, because this is just one hearing after another on her docket before the end of the year. So I'm really excited that we have a chance to move this forward because this is a matter of ongoing urgency and impact. Boston has a legacy of being a leading city in so many ways when it comes to human rights and civil rights. And we had ordinance around public accommodations protections a decade before the state finally acted on statewide legislation. And so time and again, we've stood up, particularly when it comes to big sweeping changes. Now, today's ordinance is on something that really gets us down to the interactions between every single person and their government, right? So we need both the legislation on the books, but we also need every single piece of paper, every license, every form, every document, every confirmation of identity to really reflect our constituents and our residents' identities. So today we're talking about city forms and the need to be inclusive and have gender neutral options on our forms. I want to particularly thank those who have pushed this issue at the state in terms of completely reforming the way that driver's licenses and that the Mass Commission on LGBTQ Youth has paved the way for important documentation at the state level to reflect this change, and we're trying to build on that work today at the city level. Thank you especially to Dom for surfacing this issue and making sure that their experience in City Hall, which you'll hear about later, would pave the way for everyone's experience to be affirming, celebratory, and the welcoming experience that we expect from our city leadership. So I'm very grateful to Councillor Braden for partnering on this, for so many advocacy groups for always taking the lead and making sure Boston is doing the right thing. And thank you so much to all the colleagues who are joining us today as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Braden.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Councillor Wu for spearheading this and inviting me to be a co-sponsor on this important initiative. I'm very pleased that we're working toward a real opportunity to step toward ensuring proper gender affirmation and inclusivity in our LGBTQIA siblings and family in the City of Boston, regardless of their gender identity or expression. I think this is really important work, and I'm really encouraged by the speed with which this is moving forward. And I really want to thank the advocates who have come in this afternoon, Dom and Trey Andre and Tanya, and our city colleagues, City Council College and the administration for joining in the conversation this afternoon. And I look forward to an ordinance that will be implemented quickly to ensure more equitable and inclusive city for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, in order of arrival, Councillor Flynn, followed by Councillor Mejia.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards, for chairing this important hearing. Thank you, Councillor Wu and Councillor Braden, for filing this and for your important work on civil and human rights issues. This is a simple act that we can do to ensure that everyone feels welcomed and accepted in our city. I represent a large LGBTQ plus community in my district, proud to represent a large LGBTQ plus community in my district. And I understand the struggle many residents face, whether it's discrimination or being excluded. And as a city, we should continue to celebrate our diversity, but to also recognize that people's gender identity should be respected and recognized. I think this is a further step towards being more inclusive, and I support it. I just want to say thank you to my colleagues, to the people on the panel, and to the mayor's staff that's here as well. Thank you, Councilor Wu. Thank you, Councilor Braden, and Councilor Edwards as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Mejia, followed by Councilor Arroyo, then Councilor Janey.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the makers for filing this. Surprisingly enough, I don't have much to say other than it's about time. And I'm happy to see that we're having this conversation. More importantly, that we're going to do something about it. Having devoted my entire life to working with young people and working with youth, I think this is definitely going to be the right step in the right direction to reaffirm who they are and how they choose to identify. So providing this option is incredibly important for all city residents. So thank you, Councilor Wu and Councilor Breeden, for putting this forth. Thank you.
Councilor Arroyo, then Councilor Janey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to thank the makers for this. You know, as we head into the new year, I think it's fantastic that we're looking at ways to make sure that our government and our government forms better reflect the people who we are servicing. And so when it comes to gender inclusivity, this is one of those ideas that it seems so simple, but it makes such a big impact on people's lives. And so I look forward to seeing how quickly we can implement this and get this done. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councilor Janey.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, I just want to echo the sentiments in terms of my deep gratitude to the makers, Councilor Wu, Councilor Braden, certainly to all of the advocates and those who we'll hear from in terms of their personal stories. This is really important as we seek inclusivity and make sure that we truly have a city that is equitable for everyone. It's kind of shocking that we don't already have this on our form. So I'm just grateful that, again, it's moving forward, to the makers for bringing it forward. And I'm hopeful that we will get it done. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor, me. So I'm beyond excited about this conversation. I think that's why we had the quick turnaround to have this hearing and to hopefully see if we can get something done even this year. We want to get it done right. We've been doing apparently it wrong for so many years. So this is an opportunity to right somewhat the course and to make sure that people feel seen and valued by the government that is supposed to represent them. I just will now read into the record Councilor Campbell's letter. Dear Chairwoman Edwards and colleagues of the Committee on Government Operations, I regretfully cannot attend today's hearing on docket 1100 for an ordinance to ensure gender inclusivity on gender forms. Thank you, Councilors Wu and Braden, for bringing this ordinance to the council. The city government should belong to everyone in Boston, but inclusivity requires intentionality. Simple changes to the way we operate can make our city more inclusive, equitable, and accessible to all. I will be ably represented by a member of my staff at today's hearing and look forward to reviewing the committee's reports and working with the committee on any recommended next steps. Sincerely, Andrea Campbell, Boston City Councilor, District 4. So at this point, I wanted to also note that we have also been joined, and who will be testifying with us is, I have Dom Wilkins, Tanya Neslucen.
Sorry, I'm in my son's bedroom, also known as my teaching classroom. I'm a Boston public school teacher.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Should I go ahead and do
No,
this?
yeah, I'm just introducing everyone who's going to be testifying, and then just saying who's here. That's all. Can you hear me? Hello? No?
I can hear you.
No,
I can hear you.
Okay. And then we also have, as I will try and say more eloquently, Tanya Neslucen, apologies, from Mass Equality, Executive Director of Mass Equality, Trey Andre Valentine from the Executive Director of Mass Transgender Political Alliance. So the administration had asked, and I believe the sponsors were okay with the administration going first in their testimony. And then I think, again, looking to the co-sponsors, since this is I think it's a moment for us to be educated as well and to listen. So I would like to also go through and just allow all the panelists to speak. Very well. We've also been joined by Councillor Flaherty. So before you go, Patrick, Councillor Flaherty.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. It's great to be here with so many distinguished guests, and I'll obviously go on record of supporting the measure and look forward to hearing the testimony as the very first citywide official to support marriage equality before the Goodrich decision, and having been recognized by Mass Equality in the past. It's a great organization, and look forward to continued partnership. And this is much needed, and looking forward to having full support and get this thing on the books. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Very well, Patrick, take it away.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and councilors. Thank you for providing this opportunity to have a conversation around ensuring gender inclusive language on city-related forms. My name is Patrick Fandel, and I serve as the liaison to the LGBTQ community in the Mayor's Civic Engagement Cabinet. My pronouns are he, him, and his. In recent years, the City of Boston, under the leadership of Mayor Walsh, has been visibly and vocally on the forefront of championing equal rights and inclusive protections for every member of the LGBTQ community here in Boston. From installing gender-neutral bathrooms at City Hall to advocating for anti-discrimination laws and legislative barriers for transgender individuals and gender non-conforming individuals on Beacon Hill. More recently, in conjunction with Mayors Against LGBT Discrimination and in partnership with the Department of Neighborhood Development, the Boston Public Health Commission, and community stakeholders, Mayor Walsh stood up to oppose a Trump administration HUD ruling that would change and remove anti-discrimination protections and would allow shelter providers to actively discriminate against transgender and gender non-conforming individuals. The City of Boston's support for our LGBTQ family, friends, and neighbors is strong and unwavering. However, we acknowledge that there is still so much more work to be done, including right here at City Hall. It is heartening to see a generation free of gender-based limitations, prejudices, and antiquated social construct on the horizon. But at this current juncture, there are still significant limitations that present for the entire LGBT community, and more pertinently in this case, for gender non-conforming individuals. One of the most glaring limitations that has been identified as it applies to municipal government is gender-based language on city-related forms and documents. The notion of a gender binary is quickly becoming a concept of the past, and the perspective that male or female are the only possible identities an individual can hold is incrementally becoming obsolete. However, this summer it was brought to the attention of the registrar and the administration that a couple intending to marry could not accurately complete their marriage license as one of the pair did not identify with the gender binary options. This individual intended to note X, which was not available. As it currently stands, the City of Boston cannot offer the option because the Commonwealth of Massachusetts form is limited to male or female. Mayor Walsh promptly expressed his strong support for a legislative change relative to gender identity on Massachusetts identification and documentation to Chairman Michaelwitz, and urged him to take action by bringing legislation that would allow this change. As a result of this occurrence, continued conversations with members of the City of Boston's LGBT ERG, and in alignment with the administration's overall mission to provide inclusion for every resident, we've begun the conversation process of identifying city-related forms and documents with gender-based language, and ultimately plan to reframe that language to include a non-binary option of X. We have established a preliminary working group made up of staff from the Office of Neighborhood Services, Human Resources, and other members of the administration and finance cabinets. We intend to expand this to include representatives from other city departments to streamline the identification and collection of documents. It is the intent of the administration to catalog these documents, identify the ownership, and the process by which the document would have to be updated, and then implement the gender inclusive language as quickly as possible. While I am confident in the shift to a more gender inclusive language, I want to emphasize the massive scope of this task. We will be working with every department here at City Hall, from human resources to small business and many more, to update these documents. As we saw in the case of the marriage certificate, state and federal barriers may hinder a standard and simple implementation of this process. We anticipate that this will be a fluid process that will result in a substantial inclusive shift for not only the employees of City Hall, but for every resident here in the City of Boston. In closing, Mayor Walsh wholeheartedly supports the intent of this ordinance, and we look forward to working with the council, city advocates, and residents across the city further on this much needed update to the city's existing and future documents to provide for a more inclusive representation for every resident here in the city. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, you're not unmuted.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you for your testimony, Patrick. Mixed Dom Wilkins?
Hello. Now do the thing. Awesome. Thank you. Awesome. So, hello. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I also want to give thanks to Michelle Wu for being super responsive, and you rock. Cool. So creating a family looks different for everyone. We all know that. But based on my lived experience, there is also a direct correlation between where you fall on the gender spectrum and how easy it is for you to start your own family. Being Black, queer, trans, and non-binary, in my opinion, is as close to impossible as you can get. My partner and I had been waiting months to get an appointment at City Hall for our marriage certificate because COVID. We were ecstatic when we finally got an appointment. When we arrived to fill out forms, I honestly had not even considered that there would not be a gender X option. We live in Boston. It's, a giant liberal watering hole. And also from a more tangible, realistic standpoint, my license has an X gender marker. All of my healthcare providers give an option for multiple gender options. And honestly, as a former vice chair of the Massachusetts LGBT Commission on Youth, I'm very, very past disappointed. I cannot tell you how far my stomach dropped when I not only saw the form, but then was met with resistance from staff. After a verbal altercation with a City Hall staff member who dismissed me by saying, take it up with Marty Walsh, I decided to reach out to the people I knew who could help. And here we are today. My heart breaks for the people who arrived to be married and saw the same form that I did. My heart breaks because I know how they felt. This experience overshadowed our entire day. The rest of the day was spent making phone calls, sending emails. I spent my wedding day sending emails, trying to ensure that nobody else will have to. Amending city forms to be more gender inclusive is your way to, your effort to make sure that nobody else has to use their wedding day for the same. Thank you.
Thank you. And on behalf of myself, the Committee for Government Ops, and I'm sure my colleagues will echo our incredible sadness at your experience, and that you have our commitment to do everything we can to do exactly what you said, to make sure everyone's wedding day is a joyful, inclusive, beautiful moment. Again, I'm so sorry. Tanya Neslusen from Mass Equality.
Thank you, Chairwoman. And thank you, counselors. Today, my name is Tanya Neslusen. I'm the Executive Director of Mass Equality. It's really important to make all residents and visitors to the city of Boston feel welcome and valued. In that vein, it is imperative to implement this ordinance. When encountering gendered language on government forms, it serves to isolate a segment of our population. Most city forms and government forms in general are used at extremely sensitive points in people's lives, times of extreme joy and extreme sorrow. And to risk being misgendered or not know how to fill out the form in that moment can be disheartening at best and discouraging and isolating at worst. And we need to make sure that every member of the Commonwealth feels included and welcome. Now that we have the gender X designation on our state, at the state level, on our licenses, we need to make sure that we are keeping up with what the state regulations include, and we have the availability on forms to fill out markers that are in accordance with our state guidelines. Thank you.
Madam Chair, unmute.
Sorry. We may have some delay from Trey Andre. Is Trey Andre available? I got a last minute email saying there might be, they may not be available today. Okay. We do, to the co-sponsors before the counselors come in, I do believe we have one person signed up for public testimony. Would that be okay if we went ahead and let them and heard from them again? So I'm gonna ask that, I'm gonna go ahead and make Beck Pat Sanker. Beck, can you hear us?
Hi, yes.
Wonderful. Take it away.
Can I turn my camera on somehow? Is that
I thought, yeah, yes, you absolutely can if you're not able to. Let me see.
Thank you.
Let's see what happened. My apologies. I didn't put you in a panelist. Are you okay? Are you able?
Oh, I'm muted. Hi.
Hi.
Wow, hi. Okay. So sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. You all talk so officially. It's freaking me out a little bit. I'm 17. My name is Beck. I'm a high school senior, and I use they them pronouns. And I guess I'm just gonna talk a little bit about my experience with like public forums and stuff like that. You know, I haven't signed a lot of them in my lifetime, only being 17, but you know, the ones I have, even just every time I'm confronted with like a gendered, I guess, gendered language on official forms, it's it kind of stares back at me in a way that like it tells me that I'm not included and I'm not seen in my city, in my state, in my country. It says that I'm not a part of this, you know? So when I sign a form that's like, that has two options, like male or female, or it has like she or he or something like that, it feels dishonest. It feels like that form doesn't include me in some way. It's not applicable to me. And I've spent a lot of my life just kind of like trying to be seen and heard and acknowledged as like a fellow human being. And that's hard to do when your government doesn't even acknowledge you as a full human being on forms you have to sign. So it's just it's hard to have to choose one of those options. It's hard to have to choose the option that you know, I don't feel comfortable with whenever I have to sign something. It's hard to have no choice. It's hard to not have an option against that. And it's exhausting and it's sad. And I just wish that my country saw me as like another human being, just like the people who use she, her pronouns are seen, and the people who use he, him pronouns are seen. I'm tired of being ignored, forgotten. Yeah.
Well, Beck, I want to say your testimony was perfect and it was from the heart. And I'm going to invite you to stay on camera and to be part of this conversation because we have a lot to learn from you. And so I hope you see us as your city councilors, seeing and valuing you and and also the mayor isn't here, but his liaison is here as well. So that Patrick, but as you see your local government, I should say, seeing and valuing and listening and learning from you. Thank you so much. I think a lot of people could easily say that this is just about a government form, and you reminded us it is about who is reading it and what reminds them and what message is being sent to them when they see that form. So thank you. And yes, please stay on. And if you ever want to testify or answer a question or be part of the conversation, just raise your blue hand, okay?
Thank you so much.
Okay. So I'm going to turn it over now, going to the counselors. We'll start with the lead sponsors for any questions, suggestions, thoughts that they have about the language. And this is, I think, going to be a very productive conversation. So Counselor Wu, then Counselor Braden, then Counselor Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you so much to Beck and Dom for being part of this with us today. I think I'll start with Patrick, if that's okay. Patrick, since you're here representing the administration, you know, I hear you around the need for the state to also kind of finish expanding the reach of their changes across all of their licenses that also touch different pieces of how folks interact with the city. I think for me, you know, we've seen very many examples in the past where even though something was at the state, when the city did take action, it gave it that extra momentum and pressure and leverage to accelerate things. So I just want to, you know, for anyone who's watching, emphasize that the language of this ordinance, I'm running out of battery. Okay, I'm gonna plug in while we're talking. The language of this ordinance is also to catch any other forms, documents that we might not even realize, right? So just to basically put in a requirement that we are going to do a proactive sweep across everything, which it sounds like the administration is already beginning. Thank you so much. But to really just codify that into a requirement and make sure that the reporting and the results of that are transparent to the public and to the council as well. I will note that several years ago, I think it must have been 2014 or 2015, I had worked with the administration just administratively on an issue around birth certificate request forms, which at that time only said mother and father in terms of the names that you fill out to be able to request your child's certificate to be, you know, printed up and officially presented. So we had that changed overnight to say parent one, parent two, but you know, who knows, at least I don't know at this point what other forms there are out there that are having that kind of very significant impact. So Patrick, do you have any specific issue with this language, or does it, you know, from what you said, it sounds like it just about dovetails exactly with what's already happening and would be a good way to just codify that?
Thank you, Counselor. I think it dovetails very nicely with the work that we've, you know, embarked on preliminarily. I do, you know, I anticipate the scope of this to be quite broad. I think from a public-facing view, you know, the city's website serves as a great springboard into various city departments. You can find some forms there. To your point, I think as we expand upon this internally, the documents that we're using, you know, inside the building, behind the scenes, are the ones where we might find the most opportunity to make the changes that we need to update to make this a more inclusive form. So far as anything that comes, I think that, you know, so far I've done a preliminary search on some of these. I think most pertinently it will come up through HR and onboarding documents. It'll probably come up in anything related to small business or the Department of Neighborhood Development, kind of in those applications or any certifications necessary. I'm anticipating with departments, for example, like MOIA, the Mayor's Office of Integrated Advancement, which interface with state agencies, but most pertinently with federal agencies. We might find documents that, you know, are restricted at a federal level or language by the agencies that oversee those. Last night I was just trying to cull some outward facing documents, and again, using the example of MOIA, for instance, to apply to become a US citizen, all of that documentation is limited to the male, female, gender binary. So I'm hoping from the mayor's office, from the city councilors, to use these pulpits that we have to advocate to, you know, our state partners, to our federal partners and our federal delegation, the pressing need to foster a more inclusive, not only city, but inclusive Commonwealth and inclusive country overall. So I think the scope is broad. I think there is a lot that we can do on the local level. And I think it's going to require uniform advocacy for those ones that we can't change with the flip of a switch.
Absolutely. And I think even that you know, what I appreciate about how we're approaching this with this ordinance is that the required reporting of what still remains, and therefore be, within those categories, being able to specify, and this is a state form and this is a federal form, I think also just helps us direct public advocacy to back up the push as well. So you have no issue with the language as it's written. Great.
No.
Thank you very much.
Counselor, may I go to Counselor Braden?
Yep, I'm good. I'll try to keep this moving along. So I'm good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. It's a question for Patrick in terms of reviewing the forms that already exist and are, reviewing the scope of the forms. Have you any idea? I know you've been talking about this issue for some time. Have you any idea how long that might take, or have we some sort of sense of how the scale of it? You said it is quite broad, but how broad is broad, and some sort of a timeline that we might be able to achieve these goals?
I think that, so I know the ordinance mentions the 60-day reporting period. I think that is something that we're still considering. I think there's a lot of work that can be done to identify, catalog, determine ownership, and identify what processes would be needed to change those documents. I would say that so far as scope, we're still in the early stages of evaluating that. I think by the 60-day benchmark, I think we will probably have accomplished some good work. I think looking past that, I think it's going to be more fluid. As I said, we're trying to establish a broad working group. So I think it's going to become a very streamlined process if we have one representative from every department there to, forward documents and discuss the process needed to make that change. I am just trying to get ahead of any unforeseen barriers, whether it be, I think we're talking most readily about the barriers that might present from the state and federal levels, but I want to be cognizant of barriers that might present from a technical level. If we have to do any changes on the back end with any related forms, if it's an online form, if it involves a third party, let's say source, I just want to be cognizant of that. So I think we're still evaluating it. I think the 60-day benchmark is something that we can work with, and then beyond that, obviously, this is something that we need to do. I just want us all to be cognizant of potential hiccups.
Thank you. Have we time for another question, Madam Chair? In terms of interfacing with the Fed, not so much the state, because the state seems to have, I'm sure they have got gaps in their forms as well, but when we interface with the more federal, at the federal level, I think, can you discuss what the barriers might be at that level?
I would defer to IGR for those kind of discussions, but preliminarily, I noticed, again, with agencies like MOIA and agencies that interface, I think with actions that require, the federal oversight, for example, immigration forms, if it's a federal grant, if it's something of that scope, I think that's what I would be worried about. So I would defer, again, to the IGR team on that front and other members of the administration on the direct contact with those agencies. That's just my anticipated kind of understanding of the situation.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We've also been joined by Councillor Sabi George and Councillor Bach. I didn't know if either one had some brief opening remarks or if they would prefer that we continue on. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor, my apologies, Councillor Flynn, followed by Councillor Mejia. I'm sorry, I just got the text that I think Councillor Flynn had to go. When he comes back, I will put him back in the circulation. So Councillor Mejia, followed by Councillor Arroyo.
Thank you. I just have a quick question, Councillor Wu and Councillor Breeden, and potentially, since you guys are the makers of this, I'm just curious, would this also include forms like in the Boston Public Schools? Because I know that during registration, we have to pick genders. Is this for all, or just like things in City Hall?
If I may, Madam Chair, it is written to apply to everything within city government, including BPS.
Okay, well, you got it covered. Because that's what I was going to advocate for in the Boston Public Schools. That's really important in terms of the discussion. And I think that this is a no-brainer, to be honest with you. And I don't think there's a reason for anyone to occupy space for the sake of occupying space. So I don't have any real specific questions as it relates to this. I just think it's a no-brainer, and it's something that we need to move along with. So I appreciate Councilor Edwards. You all are lucky that she's the chair of governmental ops, because she makes it happen, y'all. And that's it.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. I really thank you. Councilor Arroyo, followed by Councilor Janey. Oh no, I'm so sorry. I'm between the screens. I'm missing text messages that came through. So my apologies. Is Councilor Janey? I think she also had to.
Can you hear me?
Yes, there you are. Okay.
Can you hear me? Okay. I'm sorry. I'm not at a place where I can be stable. I don't have my packet in front of me, but wanted to just say again to the makers how grateful I am for their leadership, and to those who have shared their stories, deep, deep apologies for how you have interfaced with city government and how that has made you feel. No one should be made to feel that way. And I'm glad that we are doing something about it in terms of this ordinance, and it has my full support. So I don't have any specific questions. I just hope that we can move it along quickly. I share the concerns and excitement that this is going to expand for all city forms, housing applications, school registration, etc. And it has my full support, and hopefully we can get this done and vote on it in our next meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, my deep gratitude to the makers.
Thank you very much. Councilor, well, I'm next, but then after me, I'll be Councilor Flaherty, Councilor Bach, and Councilor Sabi George. I just had a very quick question for the administration. I'm not hearing a no, but I'm not hearing a yes about the ordinance. And so it's government op chair. I'm kind of wanting to know, is it red light, green light, yellow light?
We fully support this ordinance.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
And if I could, Councilor, well, I just want to go back to Councilor Mejia's question about the Boston Public Schools. We will fully be encouraging all of the quasi-agencies, BPS, BPD, BFD, the BPDA, to take up action on this matter. I know the intent of the makers was to be a broad sweeping change, and we'd like to underscore that comment as well.
Excellent. So I look forward to working, all of us look forward to working with the administration. We're going to definitely bend this arc towards justice with this legislation. I just wanted to echo the sense of urgency too, because our city Human Rights Commission and city laws make clear that we as a city are not allowed to discriminate based on gender identity. So if our forms are not in line with our own legal code, we're subject to liability, honestly. So I prefer to close that loop and make sure that we are not, and with a sense of urgency, quite frankly, to make sure that we're lucky we haven't been on the other side of a lawsuit right now, because we have a law that basically bans this kind of discrimination. So since we're all on the same page, I agree with Councilor Mejia. No sense in beating the same drum. Oh, I'm serious. I see a blue hand. Mixed Wilkins, would you like to? Yes.
Just had a quick, Patrick, you said for BPS, you're going to encourage BPS like partners and stuff to use that, or you're going to require?
Require.
Okay.
Require.
Thank you.
And again, thank you for your wholehearted support from the administration. Councilor Flaherty, Councilor Bach, and Councilor Sabi George. Oh, if I don't look at all my screens. We'll just go Councilor Bach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thanks so much to Patrick from the administration and especially to Dom and Beck for sharing your stories, and to Tanya for being here. From Mass Equality, I agree with everyone that this is urgent and something that we should be doing without delay. And I really want to underscore, to me, there's sort of two dimensions of this. One that I think we've heard really strongly and movingly from all of you is how, you should not, when you're interacting with government, be confronted with anything that sort of questions your identity, makes it feel like you don't belong, adds that negative aspect to what should be a joyous day, or just like a simple day of going about some regular business. I also want to add the fact that I think this is a really important step, just because of the many ways in which our society has long sort of like added gender in as a component of things where it doesn't need to be. So I think in addition to the importance of having this other option, I think it raises the question of why we have gender and gender narrowly defined in so many forms, when the reality is that the city and government in general should be interacting with people as people, and not in ways that are sort of differentiated on the basis of gender. So I think this is an important step for us on a couple of different fronts. And it sounds like we're in agreement about taking this action. And so I've got no further questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bach. Councillor Sabi George.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize for coming into this hearing a little late and missed some of the earlier questions. But my one thought, my one sort of question, and wonder if this is an appropriate place for it. I think it may be. Have we looked at our building code regulations at all to see if there is language that requires things like a men's restroom or a female's restroom, women, or is that language in there, or can we adjust and adapt that language?
My understanding of the ordinance is that we would have to. We would have to literally go through every single form ever used by any city department,
right,
and check for any gendered language, okay, and then confirm, one, that it's there, and then two, that it's now inclusive.
Where it's the specifically around building code, where that may be like state ordinances too, like there are certain requirements to have certain things, so that language in that code may be something that we'll have to take a look at in a different way.
Correct.
Right. That's the only thing that I'd add to the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sabi George. Councillor Mejia has raised her blue hand.
Yes, I had one more question. It was more of an afterthought, and I'm not sure if this, I'm just going to throw it out there. Where's Councillor Edwards? So there you are. I like to see your face when I'm talking. So I'm just curious about, I know we're talking specifically about language on forms, but I'm also just wondering, and maybe this is something that we can consider down the pipeline, Councillor Wu and Braden, maybe something else, is that also how educators address students. Is there a way for us to utilize this opportunity to, it's not just about forms, but even how customer service, right? When you go pay your parking ticket, if you call me ma'am, what about if I don't identify as ma'am? Like, is there a way for us to take this one step further, and not just about forms, but also verbal communication? Is that being extra? But I'm just curious if we could just throw it in there, just because I think it's worth considering. And I don't know who will answer that, but I'm just putting it out there.
I think that what we're learning is that the forms reflect culture and culture reflect the forms. And so just by virtue of having this conversation about the forms, we are informing and demonstrating to our constituents that we absolutely want to change, not just how we have people fill out forms, but how we talk to each other. And then how that is reflected in the ways in which that is done is going to be, especially if we're talking with HR policies and with policies within the city government and the training that we have in diversity. I think what would be great is if Patrick could come back to us with how gender identity and gender equity is taught in I know I did training, for example, when I worked for the city of Boston. You go through the training, you get an orientation. So it'd be great to know how we orient our employees. I think part of that part of Dom's experience was somebody clearly did not have correct training in how to deal with gender identity. So that's one thing we should commit to. I don't know that the ordinance necessarily would be the proper vehicle for that commitment, but I think I see with Patrick's head nodding, I think we can get that commitment and training. And then as it transitions over into Boston Public Schools, I think we can easily get the Superintendent Casilius to commit to that as well for the training for the teachers, paras, bus drivers. I mean, I think it should be a whole entire culture of anyone who interfaces with the public on behalf of the city of Boston, especially with the city of Boston's tax dollars, our tax dollars paying for them to do so, needs to have an understanding in this. And I'll admit my own ignorance. My own, someone had to explain to me how to say MX for Dom. It's mix, by the way, I learned. So I don't, well, ignorance might be a little hard. It's more willful is ignorance, but just inexperience, I would say I have, and a lot of people do as well. And so I'm ready to learn. And I think we as a city of Boston should create the resources to teach.
And Councilor Edwards, do you think in terms of this ordinance, would we be able to ask Councilor Wu and Councilor Breeden, since it's yours? So I should be asking y'all, but through the chair to however it looks, I just think that, do you think it's possible to have like a dashboard so that we can see which of our city agencies have not been living up to this? Is there a way for accountability? How do we know once this gets passed, how do we know that everyone is abiding by this new ordinance? How will we know that? Is that, because if it's written in the law, sorry, I didn't notice it, but just curious.
Yeah, well, I think the goal was the ordinance will put the requirement formally out there and codify it, but then the 60-day report back of here is where everything stands across agency will give us a chance at least to dig in. And then if we need to make changes after that, to say, okay, now let's have real metrics. But I think some of that will have to come out of the working group that Patrick's talking about to really make sure that it reflects department by department what makes sense in terms of the types of interactions with constituents, or types of forms that are put, or how often forms are changed. Is it the same forms that they put out over and over again, or different ones every time? So I think for at least on my part, I won't speak for Councilor Breeden herself, it was important to have the accountability piece of making sure that there was a formal requirement of a report back to the council within a certain time frame.
Okay.
I think also I'd love to see a verbal, like a written commitment on the front page of each department, that this is something that it's a broad statement of inclusivity and non-binary language that should be across the board, and invite feedback. This is what we're aspiring to. We might screw up, but let us know when we're screwing up, so to speak. As this is a learning curve for many people who are unfamiliar with this language. So I think a honeymoon period to educate and engage people in the conversation would be very appropriate. A training is very essential. Thank you.
We have 2 blue hands raised. So I just want to I think we've gone through one round with the counselors. So I want to go to Tanya and Beck have both raised their hands. I think Tanya was first in raising her hand, and then Beck, thank you so much. We'll have you go after Tanya, okay?
I just wanted to address Councilor Mejia's comment about, going hand in hand with training. In my experience, a lot of the misgendering that happens because people are just not aware. And just the simple act of having the proper gender on the form helps in so many ways when you hand it to your clerk or you hand it to a customer service agent, and they can look down and they can see the gender X and know not to address you by he or she, and then adopt gender neutral language because it's in front of them. Also, a lot of people are not aware just how prevalent non-binary people who identify as non-binary are. And just seeing those forms come in is just something that will breed familiarity and a layer of respect right off the bat. And I think that training is important, but I think that, you know, updating the forms is just a really crucial first step in giving people the opportunity to address people by their proper and appropriate gender. Thank you.
Thank you. Beck?
I completely agree about you know, the fact that forums can really spark that kind of conversation or that thought process in people. And I agree that, you know, just seeing how many non-binary people exist in your space, like, is I think it's a good reminder, and it might prompt some people to stop, to be more open and willing to learn. I wanted to comment on the position of public schools and teachers when using they, them pronouns, non-binary, the way they treat non-binary students. As I said, I'm a senior, and you know, there's like only 2 teachers in my school who use my pronouns, and the rest of them consistently ignore them. And one of those 2 like forgets all the time anyway, even though she tries. So yeah, it's, sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought. Yeah, so the teachers don't really use my pronouns at all, which is a little bit weird because they're adults. They should, you know, they're educators. They should have to learn about these things, and they should have to treat their students in ways that make them feel comfortable and safe. I don't think it's right that educators are just kind of not educated about these things because they can blatantly misgender their students and just make them feel unsafe and really uncomfortable in their classrooms. And I think it's also important to do the same thing with students. And I don't know if I'm totally off base here because I don't know much about the legal side of things, but I actually run the Alliance organization at my school. I'm the president, and last year we started this campaign to try to involve queer history into the curriculum, and we were thinking about somehow branching that to, you know, other schools in the area, maybe bring that to the legislative side of things. And even if it's not like queer history, I think that it's definitely a really important topic of conversation to think about, including some kind of education around queer people, education about non-binary people in public school curriculums, because as a non-binary student who uses they, them pronouns, it's really difficult to walk into a classroom and have a teacher misgender you in front of like 20 other classmates, or dead name you in front of 20 other classmates repeatedly, or just have all of those 20 other classmates take that as a sign of, yeah, you can do that now. That's allowed. You can just misgender me and dead name me as much as you want. And it's because neither of them have the proper education and the proper tools to actually be, you know, good about this and allow people to feel safe and comfortable in their spaces. And I'm tired of having to educate people everywhere I go and having to advocate for people using my pronouns and respecting me as a human being, because somehow I'm like different, somehow I'm like weird compared to other people, and people just don't get it. So they will choose to ignore it. I don't feel like that should be my job.
No. We agree.
Yeah.
We agree. And could you educate me right now? Were you saying dead name or dead name you?
Dead name, it's when you use a transgender person's former or birth name. So their given name at birth. So since a lot of transgender people will change their names to fit their preferred gender. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have the support of the administration and we have wonderful legislation before us, I think what we can do in the next less than a week, in the next 6 days, 7 days that we have, we can make sure that we are all clear down to the comma. I don't think we need a working session on this. I think we can do this amongst ourselves. So I encourage advocates, I encourage everyone who spoke today. The legislation is not complicated. If you would like a copy of it, Christine O'Donnell, or you can email the committee, ccc.go@boston.gov. We will give you a copy of it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm sure the co-sponsors would love to hear everyone's thoughts about how we're going to get this done next week. So unless anyone has anything else to say, so maybe some concluding remarks from the co-sponsors. Other than that, I'm going to go ahead and close out this hearing. All set?
I just want to thank everyone for their participating in the conversations. Beck, thank you so much for what you shared with us, and Dom and Tanya, thank you so much and Patrick, thank you for all being here. And I'm very, very excited to see this move forward. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Patrick.
I just want to reiterate what the counselor just mentioned. This is truthfully my first city council hearing testifying at, but I think the importance of the discussion we're having here today has such greater implications than any one of us, and the little bit of kindness and value that this change will bring, not only the residents of Boston, but hopefully inspire other cities, municipalities across the Commonwealth. It's just very exciting to me. So I want to thank you, Beck and Dom, for sharing your stories, the makers of this. And then thank you for having me here today.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. So
thank you all.
appreciate everyone.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your stories.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Bye.